If you're not providing a value, you really don't have a reason to exist. Price is just noise. If you're on a journey and you haven't named your destination, you're probably not going to get there. I've got plenty of battle scars and I've learned from those. Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards.
Welcome to another episode of Fortunate Fishes, where wealth is more than money. It's not only financial capital, it's intellectual, social, human, emotional, and spiritual. And today we have Troy Templeton, who created and took over and built one of the top private equity funds in the United States. You're going to learn how he got that passion early on by a book that inspired him, and also how junior achievement, which has been around 100 years, teaching kids in school how to become entrepreneurs, financial literacy, and how he took that passion to help hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs all across the nation. And if you love this one, please support us, hit the subscribe button, and follow us on all social media channels. Troy, I'm so excited to talk to you today. You're the first JA kid we've had on the show, and just being on the national board and all that you do for financial literacy and entrepreneurship, really looking forward to talking to you today. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Charlie. Looking forward to it. It's first podcast I've been on, and I'm looking forward to having this experience.
Great. Well, you made it to Miami from the Midwest, I guess from Chicago, and I'd love to get into your story. And particularly, your father was one of these guys that traveled all around the country and made a decision to really focus on family. And I'd love to hear that story and how you ended up in Miami and a little bit about your journey.
Well, sure. It is interesting. And, unfortunately, my dad's no longer with us. He's been gone for about 13 years. And, it's only when they're gone that you realize you didn't sit down and talk to him about some of these things that really had an impact on your life, but you
Right.
never really got to get that side of his story in depth. But we were in Chicago, Illinois. I was where I was born. 4 kids. I was a middle child, and my dad worked at Florsheim Shoes. Started out as a shoe salesman, ended up as executive vice president. Had a very successful career. Never saw my dad in my first 10 years because, as you said, he was always on the road.
Right.
His example to me was the importance of work ethic, being creative. He was actually a shoe designer.
Wow.
Came up with the Imperial, which is the putting the shoe in the little bag and the kind of the whole design and marketing around that. But my dad was always traveling, and at one point he was offered a promotion to become president of U.S. Shoe, which owned Florsheim at the time, and which would require a move to St. Louis. And he was only 40 years old at that point. I was 10. And not only did he not take the promotion, he decided to quit Florsheim and pick all of us up, move to sunny South Florida, where most homes didn't even have air conditioning back then, and opened up a chain of luggage and gift stores called Bentley's.
Wow.
And I
And
always wondered, 40 years old to kind of take that kind of entrepreneurial chance. And when I asked him about it, he said, I didn't know my kids. I wasn't spending time with them and with my family. And, it wasn't about being the highest title at Florsheim. It was there's more to life. And that was an important life lesson early. But I never really got to explore that deeper with him other than kind of that surface. I just took the words and I kind of filed them away. Now where I am in life, it's something I would have loved to have really spent more time on, because what does it take for a 40-year-old guy
sure.
who, who's doing well, but he wasn't well off. It's not like he had banked millions. He was a corporate guy. And back then, it's not like you had a lot of stock options and
Right.
millions of dollars. I think he'd done okay, but to kind of chuck all that in and take the family across half the country.
And what
And
was Miami like in those days? Like, when did you were when did you come to Miami?
I was 10 years old and moved when it was sixth grade, which I remember there was busing back then. And my parents didn't really want to bus me. So they put me into a Montessori school.
Mhm.
And I went into that school kind of 2 years ahead of everybody else. But the Montessori school is more like sign a contract and do what you want to do.
Right.
So I was like, well, I don't really need to do anything. The 2 years that would have had us bust moved into the public school system. And then that first year was like a year behind.
Wow. So you had to
Um,
catch up now.
and so then I had to catch up. Uh, and I did, but that first year was a little rough going into that grade. And then, then everything was fine after that first year, but that first year was pretty rough. So
And how did you get introduced to, like, junior achievement of all things? And can you tell everyone, like, what is junior achievement for those that don't know what it is?
sure, it's interesting. Most kids probably dream of becoming a baseball player or a football player or whatever. But when I was a big reader, I
Mhm.
read a lot as a kid, and there was one book that had an impact on me when I was about 11 or 12, and it was called Robber Barons. I actually still have a version of it. It was
Wow.
written in 1962. It really wasn't, I think, written for an 11-year-old, but it tells the stories of Rockefeller, Morgan, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, and I had heard those stories. It wasn't so much about the wealth that they created; it's the businesses that they created and how they went about it. And now, of course, they would all be canceled.
That's true.
But even back then, I was going, wow, that's not really a fair way to compete. But there weren't any rules. And until Teddy Roosevelt came in with his progressive movement, which is kind of strange for a diehard Republican, and the antitrust and all of that, there were no rules. And if not these guys, there would have been other guys that would have done what they did. But to me, it wasn't so much about their tactics. It was about these men, where they came from, all immigrants, all, from nothing, and through grit, creativity, and just sheer will, they built extraordinary companies, many of which are still basically around today and the leaders
Sure.
of their industry. And I just found those to be fascinating. And I knew I was never going to be running down the football field or hitting home runs. And but that fascinated me.
I was kind of a nerd too, a big reader. Probably my father was as well, and he loved reading biographies. For our allowance, he would assign a book, different ones to, I had 3 siblings, but the books I was reading were the life of, like, George Marshall, General Patton, and all. My dad liked these war books, and now
Right.
I'm thinking, well, hey, I went to the Air Force Academy. Like you, I was probably, something in my brain when I was that young age, but you got interested in these bold leaders, and then how did that, they don't have junior achievement in every high
No,
school, but
they don't, and it's kind of weird, right? And then that kind of turned me on to being a little entrepreneurial, a little business oriented. And
right,
I don't know if you remember this, Charlie, but Jerry Lewis used to have the carnivals for dystrophy,
yeah, I remember.
and I did carnivals for Troy. So
Ah,
I wanted to raise some money. I wanted to go on a team tour across the United States. And I remember it was $3,000, and they said, "Well, we'll pay for half."
smart
And
parents.
I had to come up with the other half. I didn't even have a savings account.
And how old were you now?
I was probably 13 at that point.
Okay.
It was like a team tour, and I always had a love for travel. which you know about too from what I
Yeah.
do as an adult. And and although growing up, my parents, we went on two vacations in my entire life. One was when we were in Chicago to Springfield, Illinois, to land of Lincoln, where he was born. And then when we moved to Miami in 1970, that's the year that Disney World opened. And in early 71, we went to Disney World. And so, but those were the only two trips that we made other than visiting
Right.
my grandmother or relatives. But I always wanted to see the world. I don't know why, don't know where it really came from. And wanted to go on this teen tour, couldn't do it. You need to raise the money, Troy. How do you raise the money? I said, well, maybe I'll have a carnival. And I ended up having like three carnivals, went around, made games, like I got a 2x4 and you had a putt, darts, hit balloons, and went around the neighborhood collecting people's things they wanted to give away, used games and stuffed animals, and those would become the prizes. Anyway, long story short, raised the $1,500 and babysitting and went on this teen tour, which was wonderful.
And how long was it? The
It was
teen
a
tour?
42-day tour, which is a long time.
Wow. So it was in the summer.
Yeah, and it started in New York, and then traveled to Niagara Falls, into Canada, down to Detroit,
And how many
all the
kids
way.
were on it?
There were about 30. It was one Greyhound bus,
Wow.
and then we traveled with actually my best friend from here in Miami, and then we traveled across the country, stopping at Mount Rushmore, which was the only time I ever got to see that. I want to take my wife Sissy and go there again. To California, down California, and then all the way across, ended up in Atlanta.
And what was the purpose was just to travel, go to museums, look at the culture in the different cities?
I don't think there's a lot of culture. These were teenagers. I mean, it was more about having fun. Um, you know,
So it's more just
it was,
exploring and adventure.
yeah, putting boys and girls together. So, it wasn't camping either. So I was never a camper. Holiday Inn would be camping for me.
And what did you get out of that? Like any big takeaways from reading that book that
It,
influenced you?
Well, yeah, going on the trip just was, oh my God, what a beautiful country we live in. What wonderful, every area was different.
Hmm.
And it just made me want to see more. And when I got into high school, I was doing very well grade wise, but looking for activities. And for us, high school was only three grades: 10th, 11th, and 12th, because
Right.
at that point, our senior class was about 1,400 kids.
Wow. Big
And we
class.
were on split shifts. So either 7 a.m. to noon or noon to 5, because the school couldn't handle that many kids. And as a result, you had a lot of extra time. And as a sophomore, but really your first year in high school, so it's kind of like a freshman, everybody just was given the late shift, noon to 12. I mean, noon to 5.
Right.
And so I was looking for something extracurricular. And somehow, I don't even know where I heard about junior achievement, but unlike today, where it's in the school, there it was outside the school.
Ah.
And in a shopping mall on the second floor in a dilapidated old area, and little classrooms, and Ryder truck was our first.
And what
Uh,
was it like back then? Like today, it's like three things: it's entrepreneurship, it's financial literacy, and it's work readiness. Back then, was it more entrepreneurship
it
focused?
was only what we call the company program, and as you know,
Right.
Joel, I know you were on the board
Yeah.
nationally as well, and so then it was only the company program, which really
Okay.
excited me. So why would that excite anybody? But to me, wow, I could start a company from scratch. I could actually run it. I could make a profit, from my days at, leading the carnivals. I really liked this. I felt it's like
So,
creating.
so what was the first company where you became president? What did you do?
It was called Ideal Ideas.
Deal ideas.
So Ideal Ideas, and our great idea was coming up with a first aid kit. And so we got like one of those little pocket protectors, plastic things that you folded over and packed it full of bandages and other first aid items, and sold it for like a buck 50 or something like that, and it cost us like 75 cents. But through junior achievement I learned what a gross margin was, what sales were, coming up with a marketing plan. I was president of my first company then, at 15, and we turned a profit. But we found most kids weren't buying first aid kits, so you sold them to your parents, and then what do you do?
Right. And was your dad helpful to you in like these endeavors? Did he get like more involved with you, try to teach you some business skills, tactics?
My parents were helicopter parents,
Mm.
and
So you're on
uh,
your own.
I was on my own. I don't really remember. They were very proud, but I don't ever remember going to. I wasn't smart enough to say, "Dad, so what do you think? You've got a business here. Why don't you sell them in your store for me?" I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Right? Because he probably would have said yes. Knowing my dad, though, he would have taken over.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
a
there would be
problem.
some part of there that he was smart enough to realize that if he got involved, it would become his thing. And he saw, that this was my thing. But yeah, I won president of the year. I went to NAJAC, which was the national conference then, got very involved. That stayed in it through high school, 2 other years, got involved in JA from a national level, as an officer, and it was life changing. For me, it really
Right.
cemented the
And
idea that wanted to be a business. So it's nice to
yeah,
know that early. That's what you want to do.
right. So, at R360, we believe wealth is more than money, and it's not only financial, but it's intellectual, social, human, emotional, and spiritual. But what was the trigger in terms of your life in accumulating wealth? Was it more focused on you wanted to be a leader of a entrepreneurial, bold business and create something? Or was it, hey, ultimately, when you run a business, it's about money and profits? Like, what was the trigger? Was it just being an entrepreneur?
It was really just being an entrepreneur. I didn't really. I wasn't Bruno Mars, and I want to be a billionaire or so effing bad.
Right.
That wasn't the inspiration. It wasn't not important, but that wasn't what got me up in the morning.
It didn't drive you?
Thinking no, that wasn't what running a junior achievement company is not going to make you a billionaire. You're getting paid 25 cents an hour or something like that just to show that there were wages. At the end of the year,
Right.
unlike now, you gave all the money back to your shareholders. So it's not like there was anything to get rich. It was just really fun for me. An ability to create, to pivot, to learn, to get a group to move in the same direction, to convince people to buy your product, to buy your stock, to solve problems, overcome challenges. I don't know. That always just kind
Yeah.
of excited me.
Yeah. And
And
I want to ask you, like, how what I love about your story is where you decided to get go to school, get your MBA. And unlike other kids that had no idea where they wanted to go to school, you had an idea and you had aspirations and you ended up going to the right school for you. Tell us about that and how that kind of transformed your life and how important that was.
yeah, it's funny in life how certain things happen and they're forks in the road, and you don't
Uh-huh.
realize that fork at that point in time. But as you get older, you realize, wow, that was really important. If that had not happened and I had done something else, my life would be so different. As you get older and older, I think those forks are less and less meaningful or impactful for most people.
Sure,
And, for me, one that I had nothing to do with, my dad moving to Miami,
sure,
me reading The Robber Barons. I think that had a big impact. Why I picked that book, I don't, but that had an impact. Joining Junior Achievement Had I not done that, that would have changed. And in biology, I had a classmate, my biology mate or whatever on the side, a partner. She was fairly attractive and had a little mini crush on her. And she said she was going to go to Stetson University. So that's how I heard about Stetson, which is my alma mater. But I really didn't think much of it. That was in 10th or 11th grade. And when I went to apply for schools, I wanted to go to Wharton because I knew, to your point, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to go
Right.
to a business school. And so I applied to Wharton, I applied to Vanderbilt, and I applied to University of Florida as my safe school, and then Stetson because of Mindy was her name. And I thought, well, why not throw that into the mix? And so I didn't get into Wharton. And so I thought I got into the other three. So, well, I'm going to go to Vanderbilt then. And then didn't do a lot of diligence on Vanderbilt. But after I got accepted, I called them up and said, well, I want to go to the business school. And I said, well, we don't have a business school. You can major in
Oops.
economics. And even back then, I was, kind of, I don't want to be an economist. I have no desire. I don't, Adam Smith, supply and demand. That's all I need to know about
Yeah,
economics. And I still believe that for the most part. If you've got that down, almost everything in economics comes back down to
that's true.
supply and demand.
That is
And
true.
I don't think you need 4 years more of learning about economics. That's just my own personal opinion. And so I just nixed Vanderbilt because of that. University of Florida was too big. So now I really had no options. And so Stetson was it.
And tell everybody
Yeah.
where Stetson is.
Stetson is a small school in between Daytona Beach, Florida, and Orlando.
And that's where my mom got her master's in education.
And for me, it ended up, again, fork in the road. But going to Stetson is the reason that we're sitting together here right now. And the experiences that I got there at that school, the people that I met are the reasons that I ended up at Trivest and ended up in private equity and ended up doing what I'm
Wow.
doing.
Wow. Tell me how you met Sissy. Yeah.
Life sissy. So, which is another, point. So I was in a fraternity, Pi Kappa Alpha. Even then, I was not really a frat guy, but that was kind of the social thing to do. I was in the student union and didn't like student government. At Stetson, they broke out student union, student government. Government, I thought, was just people talking about stuff and not doing anything. Student union had all the money and you got to put on concerts and you're doing activities and actually doing stuff. So I enjoyed that. I ended up being president of the student union as a junior, and that was really my thing in college. But I was also in the fraternity, and we had a party, and of course I don't know what frat parties are like that now, but back then you would get a garbage can. If you had a liner, you'd put it in. You then fill it with ice, and then the key ingredient would be grain alcohol, and then you would add some punch, whatever punch you could find, Hawaiian punch or whatever.
Remember those
Uh,
days. Yeah.
so very very healthy, but got everybody happy. And then you would put your arm in it and you would kind of stir it all up. So very healthy. I think what the grain alcohol would kill anything anyway. So, and by the end of the night, usually that garbage can would be empty. But that was the party, and I was at that party. My wife at the time, I was 19. She was actually 17, visiting. She was a senior in high school and visiting a friend, and her friend didn't like who Sissy was talking to and picked me out of the room as the safe guy. And we connected then. They're just at that party. I mean, just hello. But we spent the time at the party, just the two of us, and connected. And a few months later, she was in Deland going to school, and we met up again, and then pretty much together ever since. Next month, we celebrate our 42nd wedding anniversary, 3 kids,
Congratulations.
5 grandkids. And again, that kind of serendipitous moment. Had I not
Sure.
gone to that party, I probably never would have met Sissy, and my life would have been totally different.
And and then some people go to college, they work for a while, a lot of them, they'll do their MBA 3 or 4 years later, but you made a decision to just continue with the MBA at that time?
Yeah, back then, it, for the Ivy League schools, it was
Right,
still kind of common for you to over half the people would go out get work experience,
right.
but still 30-40% didn't. But I had no desire. I knew once I was out working, I would never go back to school.
Yeah.
That never computed in my brain as an option. I figured once I was out, I was out, and so that wasn't an option. So I only applied to 2 schools at when I was graduating, Harvard and Stetson. And the thought logic was, well, if I can get a Harvard MBA, then why not?
Right,
Because
sure.
that's the most important 3 letters to have after your name. And if not, it doesn't really matter. Again, I didn't do a lot of diligence. I just filled out an application, sent it in. Even back then, that's not how you get into Harvard.
Right, but then your wife was a couple of years behind you, right?
Yes, she was a couple of years behind me, so she hadn't graduated, and we didn't really discuss what would happen if I got into Boston. But anyway, but with Stetson, it would be a 1 year program, and so in 1 year, wouldn't have to move, could just stay where we were. I'd get the 3 little letters after my name, and kind of be done with schooling and moving on to the next segment of my life, which I thought that makes a lot of sense.
And when did you get married? Did you wait until she was out of college?
No, we got married literally 2 weeks after my graduation. She was still in school, still had a couple of years to go. And, kind of funny, unlike our kids today,
Right,
I didn't think I had a safety net. So my whole life was, I've got to take care of myself. I've got to be able to take care of my family. That was always forefront in my mind. I've got to get a job. Even though I was the salutatorian at Stetson, I was president of the student union. I had a lot of things on my resume.
right.
Um, uh, every single company that came to Stetson that was doing interviews, I took the interview because I always wanted in life, I would rather I have the option than somebody else.
Right.
And it always surprised me when so many kids in the school, other students, there'd be open interview slots. And I'm going, I'm going to do well. I positioned myself to do well in these things. And there's students here that, it's like they don't care. And I never
Right.
understood that.
So tell us about your first experience, which, how did it turn out, and then how you pivoted and what you learned before, coming into the private equity world?
Sure. So my first experience actually is I don't even put on my resume. I worked for Florida Power and Light for 6 months,
Uh-huh.
$24,000 coming out in '83, and it was in Miami, Florida. They came to the school. I got several job offers. I actually wanted to go to work for Harris Corporation, but they didn't get back to me. I ended up getting a job offer from them, but it was the first day of working for
FPL.
PL. And so I turned them down. But FPL, I was in the finance department. I was a finance major, and quickly, again, didn't do great diligence back then. So I should have done a little more diligence at different points in my life. But you may not know this, Charlie, but utilities are actually regulated. And I guess I knew that, but I didn't realize how regulated. And I spent basically I don't know, 3 of my 6 months working uh, 18 to 20 hours a day, almost 7 days a week, to putting together a rate increase to go in front of the Public Service Commission for the state of Florida to raise our rates.
So not exactly what you wanted. Not very entrepreneurial.
And so when I got done with that and we were successful, I said, this is not what I want to be doing. I'm not, there's no joy in this. And so by happenstance, a guy by the name of Peter Brockway, who is a good friend today, he was a Stetson grad. He was also president of the student union. He graduated the year before I started at Stetson, but through a mutual friend, we met each other. And he worked for Southeast Bank, which was at the time the largest commercial bank in the state of Florida. He worked in the finance department. And I was talking with him, and he offered me a job to move to the bank. And so, well, that sounds a lot more entrepreneurial. Still a big bank, but to have an opportunity
Right.
to really learn about banking, about other companies, I thought that was interesting.
But before going there, I just want, you mentor a lot of kids, and while you were at Stetson, you took leadership roles. You joined and did things, and I'm sure, meeting another person that was also in the similar role as president of the union. What recommendations do you have for, kids that go to college to, really kind of, I wouldn't call it networking, but you took on some big responsibilities and did
Yeah,
things.
I think the biggest thing is to have a goal. I think almost everything I did, there was a reason, because there was a goal that I put in front of myself, and in
Okay.
order to achieve that goal, I had to do certain things. Um, and I think for a lot of people, they just don't do that. And I ask kids, "What are your goals? What are your dreams?" I get silence. If you're on a journey and you haven't named your destination, you're probably not going to get there.
Yeah, the river's just you're gonna flow wherever the river happens
Flow
to
wherever the
be
river
flowing.
goes. And that's not, I don't know where that came from for me. I didn't think I was unusual, but I think I am unusual.
Mm,
I think that there's far too many people that don't have a simple goal, whatever that goal might be.
yeah, and I'm sure it gave you a lot of leadership experience as well, dealing with all kinds of different people and budgets and spending money and getting approvals and
Yeah. And the other thing that for me, again, I don't know, if it just comes natural, but anything I get involved with, I see ways that I think it could be better. Not that
yeah,
things are wrong, but just how to make things better. And
sure,
my mind is always thinking about how do we improve where we are from today.
right.
And the only way to do that is to be a leader within that group activity, whatever you're doing. If you want to effectuate change, the only way you can do that is from a position of leadership.
You took bold action too because you're in a I mean, it's risky, right? So it's your first big job out of college, and particularly like today, I mean, kids, you know, being at a company for 2 years, it's like, wow, that's a long time. But back then, if your resume said, "Hey, you're 6 months at a place," oh, what happened, But you made a decision to move because you knew it wasn't what you wanted to do. So then you go to the next, place. I think that's a courageous, bold move in those days.
Well, thank you. I never thought that. I still don't. I just,
Yeah,
there wasn't any other option in my mind. So
right.
maybe that's what most of the things that I've done, I don't really think they're options.
With serendipitous, and you met somebody and you respected them,
Yep.
and they were in a position where they could offer you a job.
Yes. And so started there, and actually did very well. But after 3 years there, actually, my mentor Peter went off into a alternative, a private equity, but real
Right.
estate role at another company, a Canadian company. And then I was kind of left on my own, but that was actually great because now I just was able to kind of flourish But after 2 years, I realized I'm never going to be president of the bank if I'm coming from finance. I'm never really going to learn. And so this was a big step back in my career.
So you gotta be lending money to
I got to be
somebody.
lending money. That's where
Yeah.
all the leaders are coming from. And I'm sitting over here in finance. Now, I had a corner office, I had a secretary, and I was 24 years old. I had, 5 people reporting to me. I was actually
You
reporting
had climbed the corporate ladder
very
very
quickly.
quickly, very well. So again, you saw something, and now you're willing to take a step back because that was the road to be the CEO.
I always said sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards.
Mhm.
And I wasn't on the right path in my mind to get where I wanted to be and to learn what I wanted to learn. Because ultimately I wanted to run something
Right.
and be an owner. And so I thought, well, geez, if I got into lending, now I could learn about companies. I could learn about a bunch of different industries. I could meet very successful founders and entrepreneurs and learn from them. And so I went from the corner office secretary, again, still a young guy, but
Right.
uh,
Now, did you have a child yet?
when I made that decision to go back to the lending side,
Right.
we didn't have a child at that point. So that
Okay.
was with just Sissy and me. Sissy, I think, was just graduating college. So it was kind of funny when we got married, both parents basically said, well, you're on your own. And I said, well, you're not going to finish paying for Sissy's college education. I never said that, but there was
Right.
no money coming for it. So we had to cobble together our own money for that. When we got married, we had less than $1,000 in the bank. So that's where we started from.
Wow.
And that was it. No, luckily tuition at public university back then wasn't a lot of money. And Sissy worked part-time, and, we were able to do that. And, we worked on the envelope system. So those first many years, we would just take cash out, put it into envelopes for different things. So we'd have like $20 for eating out for 2 weeks. We'd have
Wow.
$50, $100 for food. We'd have, and I had all these envelopes, and we just used the envelope system, and that was the cash that we had. And we wouldn't use any credit cards, and that's how we lived for the first few years.
And when you
Um,
took a step back and you went into this kind of commercial lending, big office secretaries to the corner cubicle, what what was the change, and did you enjoy that more?
it was tough, because, certainly I thought, what the hell did I just do? I'm sitting now here with 21-year-olds. Not that I was that much older, but I was much
Right.
older. I mean, just the life experience that I had at that point. And now I'm
MBA.
sitting, doing, I thought, kind of kids work, and really starting at the bottom. I didn't
Right.
get a leg up. It was nice that they granted me the opportunity to go through that training. They didn't reduce my salary, because if they'd had, maybe I wouldn't have done it at that point,
Right.
because we didn't have the means. We'd bought our first house. I mean, things were tight, living in the envelopes. So I did, but I did think from a career perspective, my long term, and I've always never been, I think a lot of people today think that a career is a sprint. And I always say, particularly in private equity, your career is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Private equity is a marathon. Investment banking might be a sprint, but private equity is a marathon. And I think any career is. That's just the way I grew up.
Right. And what were your days like in this cubicle? Like what and how many is that like 3 years you did that?
Yeah, 3 years, and I was only 6 months in the cubicle, the
Okay.
training program. And then, I got, transferred into a group of corporate lenders, and again, quickly kinda, said, "Oh, yeah, Troy, you're not a trainee. Here's a book of business," and I was given a few accounts. And I remember one of my first accounts was Eastern Airlines.
Oh wow, I remember Eastern.
And Southeast at the time didn't have a lending relationship, but we were their primary cash management bank. So we handled all of the outgoing checks, all their incoming deposits, and all of their cash management. So about 6 months into the job, um, Eastern Airlines goes bankrupt. It's my account, mine.
Oops.
I get a call, Troy, if we accept and cash one check on this bankrupt, because when you go bankrupt, you draw a line in the sand.
Right.
Every check written of that date, if it gets cashed, it goes back to the bank's responsibility. It's a loss. So there's thousands of checks out there. People want to cash them, payroll checks. And so all of a sudden, I am managing and operating a crew of 30, 40 people communicating with, all of our branches across the state and kind of leading the charge on the Eastern bankruptcy. With the number one goal is making sure we don't cash one single check, and then put in place though the ability for them to write checks on their new account
Right.
and put that in place. And so, it was a lot in a very short period of time with making it up as I go, because actually nobody in the bank had any experience with anything like this before. But I was able to convince the folks at Eastern to continue to do business with us. And they left all their depository accounts. So all of a sudden, when you go bankrupt, actually you become, since you don't have to pay all your old bills, and you only are paying your new stuff, you quickly build up this huge cash balance. So back then, all of a sudden we had a cash balance of over $100 million in the demand deposit account, which is the interest-free checking account. They never thought about putting it anywhere. The bank's making more money than it ever had in one day. And so it ended up becoming a very, lucrative and profitable time for the bank. And we were able to, do everything properly for the old institution as well as the new, until ultimately Eastern was taken over by I forget which airline, but that was a big learning experience. Another big learning experience was you treat everybody nicely.
Mhm.
And I learned very early. I got a phone call one day. The people that kind of worked with the operations side, they were at lunch. I was eating lunch at my desk. A phone call comes in. This frantic lady on the call says, "Oh, they're denying my credit card. I need it approved." I'm going, "Well, this is the commercial side of the bank." Anyway, I didn't say any of that. I listened to her. She was a customer. I took care of her. About a month later, she calls up and says, you were so nice. You took care of my problem. By the way, I want to buy a $10 million Challenger Air jet to take me from my home in Paris to Miami to Venezuela." And she happened to be the wife of the owner of the largest industrial business in Venezuela.
Wasn't Cisneros, was it?
It was Polar,
Oh, wow.
the Mendoza family.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden, I'm financing a plane, this $10 million jet, which at the time, again, this is in the 80s, it was
Sure.
kind of a big deal for the bank. And just because I took that call, anyways, a few of these things elevated me at the bank.
I think that's a super valuable lesson. And I think, Pratt, people respond as treated. And
Yes.
you could have responded a lot of different ways. And you probably, learned this through your other careers and your leadership. But what was the big lesson there? Because that had to be a big moment.
Yeah, it was, and I think I learned it from my parents. My parents always treated everybody with respect. My dad, he was a natural born salesperson, and he said, "Troy, you never know who walks in that door, what their story is,
Yeah.
but you can learn something from everybody." And
Yeah, that's
that stuck with me. I haven't always been perfect in that arena, but I try my best to do that. But for the grace of God, all of us could be trading places. One of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Well,
And
I have a story that just brings up when I was at the Air Force Academy, where I went to school, there was a janitor, William Crawford. And, it was our first year, it was our dually year. Dually means slave. And we kind of
right,
took it out on the poor janitor. We hide his bucket, his water, whatever would kind of spill on the floor, and found out somebody was doing a story on Medal of Honor winners. And there was a guy named William Crawford in Aviano, Italy, who was from Colorado Springs. And there was about 100 men pinned down in Aviano, Italy, and this Panzer battalion was coming. And they needed someone. There was 3 German pillboxes that had them pinned down. So they needed someone to take 3 satchel charges on a suicide mission. So he volunteers. He gets shot twice, but he knocks all 3 out. They thought he had died and they got saved. But when the Germans came, they found him, put him in prison. He survived the war, went back into they thought he died. So his parents posthumously get the Medal of Honor for this guy. And lo and behold, 3 years later,
he shows up.
he shows up. So he stays in the military, becomes a chief master sergeant, and then retires and wants to be around young men and women. So I remember going up to him. It's like, hey, Mr. Crawford, were you in the Army? Yes, son. Were you in World War II in Aviano, Italy? Yes, son. I said, damn. Did you win the Medal of Honor? Yes, son. It's like, and then all of a sudden he became like a hero to all of us. And I
Hmm.
remember him teaching me, you know, his mother always said, you have, you know, 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. He taught me when you see people, think on their forehead, they have 4 letters, MMFI, which means make me feel important. And he taught us these questions, which were ask anybody, like, hey, where are you from? And then the magic question that follows is tell me more. And then, do you have a family? Tell me more. And then, hey, when you were a kid, what did you want to be? And when you grew up? And the other question was 2 more questions. He said, if you won $100 million in the lottery, after giving money to your church and all your friends and family, what would you do with the rest and why? And the last question was, when you die, if you had to put 1 word on your tombstone that you aspire to be remembered, what would it be? And I remember teaching that to my kids, and they'd go to dinner parties. They just ask questions and listen.
Right.
And it's like, your daughter is such a conversationalist. She's so
Excellent.
smart. She didn't say a word, but that that really changed my life. And I wrote in one of my books, I have a chapter on treat everybody you meet as if they were a war hero, because I was ashamed for the way that I treated him. And I remember working in a company, and I always had that picture of him with the Medal of Honor, reminding me to be nice and kind. And when I graduated from college, Ronald Reagan came to give the address, and he had never gone to the White House to get the Medal of
Wow.
Honor. So we gave him the Medal of Honor, and he's the only Army person we buried him in the grounds of the Air Force Academy because he was such a legend. But so then you develop a relationship with someone because you treated them with kindness, respect, solved their problem. And then I'm sure you got noticed by the bank, and you
Yeah.
just kept moving up the corporate ladder, I assume.
Yeah. But then again, I realized, I thought, well, geez, being a lender, I thought at the time I would be the trusted advisor to all these companies and all these founders. And I did build nice relationships, but I found is that every founder treated the bank uh, as a necessary evil.
Mm.
And let's not tell the banker too much, because if we bring them into our opportunities and our challenges, they may pull the money away. And so, I although I learned a heck of a lot, I could read a balance sheet, I could read an income statement, I could decipher a business, I could pick the good ones from the bad ones. enormously helpful from a learning perspective. And in the time that I was in the finance department, I was learning about, we did M&A. And so I was learning how to buy and sell banks and, valuation. So, I was learning really important skills that would really help me later in life. But I wasn't getting what I really wanted, which was that, that kind of, how can I help a business?
So how do you pivot from that into what became, your real wealth creation engine, which was Trivest? How did that happen?
I was not happy doing what I was doing. I could feel I didn't want to be president of the bank. I wanted to be like our customers. I wanted to be an owner, and getting some stock options and doing well at the bank was not going to get me what I thought I wanted. And so one of our customers was Trivest. And under It's a Small World, Peter Brockway, my mentor that brought me into Southeast, had left the company in Canada and had joined Trivest.
Ah,
And he was looking for an analyst. So again, kind of a step back. 'Cause I had now, I was doing very well, and now I was going to go. If I was going to go
interesting.
there, step back, starting over again. But I thought I'd never didn't call private equity back then. They were HLTs, highly leveraged transactions. They were, leveraged buyouts, LBOs. They hadn't come up with the nice name for us, our industry. So uh, I remember going to my boss at the time and saying, "Hey, I'm going to leave Tribe. I'm going to leave Southeast. I'm going to go." And why would you leave a nice, safe bank to go to a risky, highly leveraged transaction, LBO shop with not a long track record? They're a customer of ours, but still, why
So,
would you do that?
so they had been founded in what, 81 or 91?
81, but they
Okay.
really weren't started till 85 when they opened up the Miami office.
Okay.
81, 85, there was one guy up in Chicago doing some little deals. He did enough that
Right.
two guys in Miami said, "Yeah, this is working."
So you joined them 89. So it'd been around like 4 years, the Miami office.
Right, the Miami office.
Got it. And tell us, just for those that don't understand private equity or LBOs, like what is it and how does that organization, make money?
Sure. Um, at the end of the day, it's really no different than if you're an investor buying a house, right? And so if you're everybody kind of understands that concept. I'm going to go buy a house. The house may cost $100,000 back in the day. I need to have $10,000 of equity. I'm going to borrow $90,000. My mortgage cost on that $90,000 is going to be $900 a month, let's say, and I can rent it out for $1,200 a month. And the nice thing about a house, okay, I've got a $10,000 investment really and $90,000 of debt. 5 years later, it's worth $150,000. Okay, most people would say, well, you made 50 grand. Well, so that's a 50% improvement. Well, no, not really. Because at that point, I would have paid down, let's say, $10,000 of that debt. So I
Right.
have only $80,000 of debt. So I get $70,000 back. And I only invested 10. I made 7 times my money. Buying a company is the same principle. And that's what got private equity started, was all the guys in real estate doing these things. And they said, well, if we can do that with buying houses and real estate, why can't we do that with buying businesses? And the better thing about buying businesses, with a house, all I can do is increase the rent a little bit each year. But with a business, I have a chance to transform it. I could take those earnings, same thing. I buy a business for $100,000.
And in this case, you don't have to buy the entire business either, right? You could buy a piece of it,
Yeah, but at Trivest at that point in time, we were just buying, the
buying the
entire
business.
piece. You're buying, yeah. Usually the founder or the owner would stay in for an
Right.
ownership piece, but we'd be buying always a controlling interest. And so the whole idea is, hey, we can buy this, we can leverage it, and then we can put in, more money. Now, at Trivest, the very first deal they did was they bought a $10 million company, plastics company. They put in $10,000 of equity. 2 years later, they sold it for $20 million.
Wow. And when you say leverage, that's kind of the comparable to the mortgage for a house.
That's
You're
right. That's the debt that you place on the business. So
right.
back in the 80s, you were basically buying businesses at what we call asset value. So you'd look at the value of the inventory, the receivables, the real estate, and that's how the businesses were valued. But that
And as
might
an
be
analyst, you were doing a lot of that work, right?
that's right. So I'm looking at that, and you're saying, well, that's interesting, but ultimately we can sell it based on the cash flow that it's making, which would be a lot higher value than the asset value. So back then it was just buy it for asset value, sell it based on the earnings, and there was an arbitrage. Now, when there's that much profit involved, guess what? A lot of people come into the industry.
Competition, sure.
So, that worked in the 80s. I joined Travis in 89. That party was just coming to an end.
That was like the Michael Milken days, and I
Yeah,
don't know when.
exactly. That
Yeah.
party was coming to an end. We are coming into a recession, a lot of issues. Uh, you need to remake yourself. Travis didn't remake itself. It tried to just continue what it was doing in the 90s, was not very successful.
And how did you end up going from analyst? Like every place you've been, you've risen quickly. You've always wanted to be the leader. It seems like it's kind of in your genes, maybe from reading that book. So how does one go from being an analyst to actually running the place?
Yeah. Well, I think the first most important thing for anybody is never think about yourself or your career. And I know that sounds, but for me, that's what worked. For me, it was always what's best for the company. I never thought about myself in that role
Hmm.
of my impact on it, but it was just for me. It was like, oh, there's a patient bleeding out. I don't think the doctor's thinking, oh, the accolades he's going to get or she's going to get from saving that
Right.
patient. They're just thinking, I need to save that patient.
So what happened? So obviously you said in '89 party was kind of over. There was a shift in the industry, and what happened around that time? Because you're kind of on the bottom, right?
But what I would say is we were a silo shop at that time. So the founder, was more a believer that you just get smart people, they're going to do good deals. This really isn't that difficult. And that was right in the 80s. In the 90s, it really wasn't. And, I always looked at it and said, well, this isn't hard. I could pick good businesses and help them grow and be successful. And my deals did very well.
And why was that? Like, what? I mean, you just throw it out there, like, oh, I could just go in there and grab these companies we bought and made them grow. So, what was it about what you were doing that was different at that earlier stage?
That's a good question. I think that, very early on, I always ask a question when I'm looking at a businesses, and I'm not perfect, by the way. So I'm not Warren Buffett. I'm not, but I'm better than most. I've got plenty of battle scars and I've learned from those, but I've also got a lot more winners than losers. And two things. One is dealing with honest people. I can't stress that enough. Most of the deals that we did at Trivest that didn't turn out well, there was somebody that really just wasn't an honest person. One of my faults is I trust people. I think that's one of my strengths too. Your greatest strength is your greatest weakness.
Yeah.
And I'd rather trust people and be bamboozled a couple of times than go through a life of not trusting people. So one is dealing with good people. Two, it's asking a simple question: if this company disappeared tomorrow, would anybody care?
Hmm.
And
So they had to
uh,
be providing real value to
exactly, they
somebody.
have to be providing value. It kind of brought me to another seminal point in my life at Trivest that helped us, I think, do extremely well. But it's that question. And it took me a long time to find somebody who articulated it better than I just did.
Wow, that's a big Jim Collins thing too.
Yeah, good to great and
Yeah.
all of that. But I found, and I actually have it here. I always have it next to me, and I always look at it. It's a book called "Becoming a Category of One" by
Huh,
Joe Calloway.
I have not read that. Wait, 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 wait. Becoming a category of one.
Right, by Joe Calloway.
Oh, well, he's a famous guy. Tell us why that book was important.
Because at the end of the day, if you're not providing a value,
Mhm.
you really don't have a reason to exist. And what he says in his book, and I truly
Yeah.
believe, is that most companies, if you ask them why are you different, they go, "Oh, it's our people."
Right.
Everybody says that. So what you're telling me is every other company, their people are horrible. They treat their customers like dirt. They have bad products. It's we have great people. We service them well. We have good pricing. Da 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 da. I go, to me, that's all the price of admission. That's what any customer expects from any relationship. That's just getting you in the door. Why are you different? What
Mhm.
makes you different? What is it?
And it
And
was
if you
also the competitive advantage, like what was
That's the
really
compa but it's to me, it's the ability to connect on an emotional basis with a customer. That's
what
a
is it?
very different thing. Starbucks, great example. There's a lot of places you can buy coffee. I go to McDonald's, I can pay $1 and I can get a great cup of coffee. Or I can go to Starbucks and I can pay $5
Yeah,
for that same cup of coffee.
I met a guy from the investment banker at Starbucks at Solomon Brothers who saw the deal and he kicked him out of the office. And as they're way out, says, "What idiot is going to pay $5 for a cup of coffee?" And this guy, his entire career, people would see him on the street and say, "What idiot's going to pay $5 for a cup of coffee?"
Well, those are the category of one companies, right? That cup of coffee, they've built an emotional attachment with their customer base that not
Community.
only will
Yeah.
they pay $5, they will wait in line. And when they raise the price, it used to be $3, it's gone to
Yeah.
$5. They raise it a price a quarter. What happens? Starbucks makes another 25 cents for every cup of coffee.
Yeah. You got 80% margins or some ridiculous thing. Like,
Chick-fil-A, people will go out of their way. In and
yeah.
Out Burgers, Southwest Airlines, I mean, Apple, right? There are companies out there, and you can name them where you go, "Oh, of course." Because each one of those have created an emotional attachment with their end customer that is not based on price. Price is just noise.
And when did you read that book?
I read that back when I took over Trivest and said we need to differentiate.
How long were you at Trivest before that opportunity came up?
Oh, so that was probably like 2005. And so I've been a Trivest since 89.
So 6
No,
years, not a
16,
long,
no,
not
16 years.
okay, yeah, okay. 89. Yep. So by
And
then you were already, I imagine, a senior partner?
yeah, I didn't have that title, but
Right.
yes, I was kind of like a last man standing.
And that's because you had an affinity for picking good companies, good people that you trusted, that were honest, that were successful,
And I was a value guy. At the end of the day, I was a value guy, right?
which means deliver companies that were delivering real value to customers.
But I was also a value, and I think the price you pay is important. And
Yeah.
so in private equity, I never chased the big deals, and I found deals on my own by working a different network than the investment bankers. So I was not trolling the investment bankers, getting a pretty book. I would go out making calls to Charlie Garcia, who is not with Goldman Sachs, but Charlie is good friends with Michael Cole, who's the owner of a widget business in San Diego. And Charlie, says, "Troy, I know this guy. He's got a great company, and you walk me in through the front door." And I now have a personal relationship with Michael.
Yeah.
and we build that relationship. And Michael doesn't have kids that he's going to turn the business over to. He's making $10 million a year. He doesn't have a CFO because he doesn't want anybody in the company to know how much money he's making. He doesn't have a head of sales that's very strong. He's never done an acquisition. He hasn't moved past Denver in selling his products. He hasn't hired a branding company. He hasn't changed his logo. He hasn't updated his website.
So you saw a lot of, you said at the very beginning, you were one of these guys that loves to come in and find ways to
Yeah,
improve.
I like to say I like to buy dented companies. They're not turnarounds. They're dented. And
Right.
then we can fix the dents.
Got to have somebody you trust, and you're buying a control position, but they are actually running the day to day, right?
About half the time they're still running the day to day. Half the time they've transitioned the management, but not the ownership.
Got it. Okay.
And so this is their chance to do that second part. Now, the other half of the time, they are still running the business.
And while you were in this 16-year period, how many deals were you doing on average in a year? And how long would it take on average to get these dented companies and then have a liquidity event?
I started looking at our company as a business, not as a deal
Ah,
swap. And I was recognizing all the things that were problems or opportunities. So we weren't doing a lot of deals. We'd be doing 5 to 10 deals a year. We thought that was great. We'd be selling maybe, and many of those were add-ons. So it'd be 1 to 2 or maybe 3 platform investments. Those are the bigger deals where you're putting a lot of equity in, and then you add on to those
right.
with add-on acquisitions. So we'd be doing 6 or 7 kind of add-ons in 1 or 2 platforms, and then every 3 years we might be selling something. And I go, this is
Wow.
not a very good
So,
business.
so one of the things you guys were famous for, or probably still are, is where you went from like just looking at 300 companies in a funnel to like 4,000. Was that
Mhm.
something you did later once you became, stepped into a leadership role?
So, the first thing was, how do we differentiate ourselves? And that was critical because I called a banker up once, and he had sent a book. It was a good company,
Mhm.
and I read through it, and I'm talking to him, and he said, "Troy, why are you even talking to me about this? We had even back then said we're founder family owned. This was owned by a private equity firm."
Huh.
He said, "You say you focus on primarily founder family, but why you spend time on this?" And that really hit me. I said, "You're right. Why?" Because most private equity firms, most investment firms, they don't want to turn down any opportunities, right? We're all the smartest guys in the room, and so we never want to say no to something that could be a viable deal. And Trivest, we were the same way. And so the kind of biggest moment at Trivest history for us was that decision to stop looking at any deal other than being founder or family owned. And that took a lot of convincing,
That was
internally.
the Callaway book too, right?
That was the kind of the Callaway. It was before the Callaway book
Right.
because, the Callaway book kind of cemented what I was doing. And that brought us to what I call our Just Say No program, how we truly differentiate. But that first decision to start saying no, because what that does is when you focus on something, it
Right.
actually doesn't constrain you, it frees you up. It frees you up tremendously from ability to market and sell because now I don't have to be one thing for everybody. I can be the best for you, the best for you. And nobody else can really do that.
Right.
And
And then
s-
when you succeed and you have happy customers, clients that can introduce you to other people, or you can say, hey, talk to these 3, 4 companies and see what we did for them.
that's right. And that's the problem, though, in private equity. We are larger than, and we're like 10 aircraft carriers put together to change the direction. It takes years, right? Because not only then do you change the direction, you then have to prove that it actually works.
Right. So how did you do that?
Time and just relentless pursuit of excellence in doing what we did, never deviating from the goal of we were going to be the best choice for founders. putting together what we call our Just Say No program.
And what was the Just Say No program, like, more
So the Just Say
explicitly?
No program is the realization that most founders have a negative opinion of private equity. And that is a true statement because what positive articles are written about private equity even today, other than our own trade max?
Yeah.
It's a unicorn. They don't exist. And most of our competition, even today, doesn't realize that. And there are no more, excuse the word, virgins. Every founder has been touched by private equity. And if we're talking to them for whatever reasons, the private equity didn't work for them at that point.
In the last 3 months, I've been approached by 3 private equity firms. I told them all to go away. Don't call me. No interest.
No, and that's right. So we approach them very differently.
Mhm.
So the number one thing that private equity firms will want is, Charlie, if you're selling your business, uh, you know, you're the guy. You got to stay in. You must reinvest a significant portion. Now, Charlie, you probably have been at your country club and all of your buddies are telling you, don't ever, any money you leave in the company, just write it off. It isn't going to be worth anything. Those private equity guys think they're the smartest guys in the room and they operate with sharp elbows. So stay the hell out of the way. Sell your business to them, but realize anything after that. And so when they first come to you and say, well, you got to leave money, that's their first opening line.
Right.
What's your reaction? Not very good. Our opening line is just say no. You don't have to reinvest with us. Get to know us. If you decide you want to invest, tell us before closing. And we're happy to have you include you as an investor, but we'll give you 100% cash. If you do reinvest with us, I'll tell you what, too, you'll be at the same place in us in the capital structure. We're not going to put you in common and us in preferred. We're going to be at the same place. So we're all going to have the same goals. We're going to
So
bring your management team in
so you
at that
treated them
same place.
fairly.
We treat everybody, and that's a differentiator, but it is.
Yeah.
It's sad to say it is. We'll give you 100% cash. We're not going to over leverage your business. We have, at this point, 50 portfolio companies. None of them have subordinated debt, senior only debt. We're not going to have complicated working capital adjustments. And at the end of the day, if you look, we closed on 78 deals last year, 78 companies that we acquired. Every
Wow.
one of them, if we showed you the letter of intent and the purchase agreement, there's not a penny's difference. There's no retrading. We close on the terms of the deal that we signed at the letter of intent.
Well, tell me before you get there, because the other thing that you guys are famous for is just the number. Obviously, if you're looking at 300 companies, it's different than if you're
But
looking at 4,000. And if you're sourcing them the way that you're talking about, how the heck did you do that? And then I remember you guys are also famous for like a Mercedes program or something.
right. So, yeah, we want to find the deal before the deal finds us. One of my partners says that famously, and
It's
he's
like the house
absolutely
thing also. You want like an off-market house before it even gets to be listed,
right.
you want to be talking to them.
And by the way, though, I always feel we're paying a fair price. We're not paying an airfare because, again, we're buying dented companies. So you can't compare the value that we pay versus the
Right.
value for a company that should be selling for a premium because it's got a top management team. It's got a great CFO. It's got a great sales leader. It's moving into new markets. It's got new products. It's got all these things, right? A company that doesn't have all those things shouldn't sell for that
Right.
same price. So we are paying a fair price for the
Right.
businesses that we're acquiring. But to your point, why we love the lower middle market is one, we're fishing in the largest pond.
But you also wanted, I mean, you had pretty ambitious goals. If I remember, you wanted to increase like the profits by like 3x in like 5 years, something.
Yeah, we
You,
call it the
you
path to 3x. So this all kind of ties together, but how you fill a pipeline. So the way I look at any company is it needs to do three things very well. And if it does those three things, it's probably a
yeah,
good company. One, it has to have a great business development. It needs to bring in opportunities for private equity that's bringing in deals.
right.
Two, it's got to have a great value proposition for
Yeah.
that customer. And for us, that's our Just Say No program. And three, you actually do have to create value. And for us, that's our path to 3x. And that's how we can turn every one of our investors' dollars from $1 into $3.
And of course, if you're saying to me, hey, let your money or a big chunk of your money ride, and you have a track record of actually doing that, then
Over 75% of our companies actually average close to a 6x return.
that's phenomenal.
So over 75% of our companies achieve that, at least that 3x, and those that do, that join that club. And it's a phenomenal result. But it isn't, it's done by having a process that we take every company through that
Right.
includes
Okay.
getting them to become a category of one company.
So you're really, you're doing some heavy lifting. So you're providing that company real value.
That's right. Getting back down though to your business
Right.
development question, which is a good one. Um, I think everything's a numbers game. If I
Yeah.
see 300 deals, I might close on 3. If I see 3,000 deals, I should be able to close on 30.
Right.
So this becomes a numbers game, and you have to have a process for dealing with those numbers. And I don't want to get 3,000 books from investment banks. I want to get 3,000 introductions from Charlie, who's going to bring me to Michael. How do I do that? Well, that's becomes a multi faceted process of branding, marketing, sales, business development, and having something to say. And so we went from basically we're just the deal team. People like
Mhm.
myself would make one of the first things we did, we put in a calling program. And so part of our jobs were every month, each one of us had to make 25 outbound calls. We tracked those. And when what we would see before that was we'd get a deal going and everybody would focus on diligence. And
Right.
then our marketing efforts went down. We closed that deal and now we'd have no pipeline. So we had to have a pipeline. So
And was
that,
somebody giving you the like, hey, Troy, here's the 25 companies to call, or were you coming up with that?
well, first of all, we would rarely call Michael directly. We're trying to find Charlie. We're trying to find
T-
I learned very early
Introductions.
on. Yeah. Cause back when I first started Trivest, I go, I'm not getting anything out of calling Merrill Lynch. Everybody's calling Merrill Lynch.
Right.
Everybody's getting a deal. So then I said, why don't I just call companies? But even back then, I had to get through secretaries. So every 10
Right.
companies, I would get through to one person. Then I found the business broker community. And for every business broker, I could talk about 4 or 5 companies and maybe get an introduction to one. And so that became the sweet spot for me was developing that. We built up you know, a database of, a couple thousand names. That database is now 25,000 plus names.
Now, was your strategy also regional in that you were going to concentrate on a particular region, or was it a nationwide effort?
Well, I never believed in that. Everybody wanted
Okay.
to put us in a regional mode. And in fact, if you looked at it, 25% of our deals were in the state of Florida, but that was just our home base. It wasn't a
Right.
strategy. And it always kind of irked me. I said, well, Florida's a pretty big state, but California is 4 times larger. Why aren't we doing
Texas.
only 2% of our deals are coming from California? And so that's where we start our regional strategy and putting business development people in different states so that they were closer to the communities that they
Right.
were looking to acquire companies. And so building from one business development person to now we have a team of around 11 um, took us from seeing those few thousand or few hundred deals a year to the thousands of deals a year. I think we'll see 5,000 deals
Wow.
coming this year.
What's like when you were hiring these business development folks in your industry, what was the typical experience, or how did you find them? What kind of like
Sure, it's you're looking for people that are used to calling on companies and selling something and getting through those secretaries and getting through to business brokers. So somebody who doesn't mind. This isn't as much about getting in a car and driving and having 3 appointments in a day.
Mhm.
This is about making 25 phone calls a day, good phone calls, and turning that into 5 or 6 deals a day. And if you can do that, you're going to have a lot of opportunities. So it's finding somebody who enjoys doing that.
Right.
And even better if they have a bit of a financial acumen that they can rely on, because they do need to talk the talk.
Yep.
They should be able to communicate with both a business broker, or also a founder.
Right.
So, you're looking for some maturity, but you're really looking for just grit, personality, and ability to hear the word no. It's a funny business, right? If I'm
Yeah.
a computer salesman and I go out and I sell a computer, I come back and I get high fives and I'm up on the board. I sold a computer. Everything
Right.
is great. At Trivest or in private equity, I go out, I convince a seller to sell his company to us, and I get a signed letter of intent. Now I've got to go back and sell the private equity firm that this is a good deal. It's a double sale.
Wow.
It's very hard to do. And managing that, teaching that, finding the right people that can sell both to the founder, but also the right deal that will sell internally, that becomes a much more complicated effort than it is, hey, Charlie, you just go sell this widget for $5
Right.
and you're
Right.
you're a
Right.
superstar. Here you got to sell it twice and in very different ways, right? One
Right.
that I'm paying, more than I'm paying a premium for your business, Mr. Cole. And then going over to us and saying, I know it may seem like a higher price, but here are all the opportunities that we
Right.
have to build this
Right.
company.
And one of the things we haven't talked about, because this money you're investing doesn't grow on trees. So you also, as a leader, have to go, pension funds, and you have to sell them to give you the money to buy these companies. So tell me about, like, what are the size of these funds? Where was it when you started? Where is it now? And tell me about that process.
Sure. Yeah, when I started with Trivest, we were primarily just a firm that dealt with high net worth individuals, and then migrated to some institutions. Then we had a difficult fund, and so all those left and had another set of investors. I wasn't really part of all that. I was too
Right.
junior. But when I came in and it was getting into that role on the fundraising, it became my goal in life. All the fundraisers at Trivest would literally take 2+ years to raise the money, and it was a slog. Uh, and I would look out into the industry, and then I would see these other firms who would just say, "Oh," they raise their hand and say, I'm raising a fund," and their
The
fund would
money
be
would
raised.
magically all come in.
And so I made that the goal for our firm. I
Okay.
said, let's be that firm where all we have to do is say we're raising money and people want to support us. Because if you've achieved that, that means you've done everything else right, right?
It,
The only way you can achieve that is you've got to be doing deals. They've got to be good deals. You have to have good relationships with lenders,
right.
with the brokers.
Let me ask a curiosity question, just because the way you're talking sounds like this, but I don't, you, you're talking very similar to like a Jim Collins flywheel that
Mhm. Yes,
you got
that's
to do.
exactly right. I would use that as we got to get the flywheel going. It's going
So
to
it's a
take a
flywheel.
while. When will
Awesome.
this flywheel be going?
Pe-
Because until it does,
Pete, can you describe that? Because people don't realize that Amazon wouldn't be Amazon had in 2001 they had not applied the flywheel. Can you, like, what
sure,
is it and why is it important?
it's incredibly important because it allows you to scale. Business development is a good example of the flywheel. Unless you have a process and a strategy for getting deals,
Right.
it's just going to be kind of one off. And every deal is going to be a challenge to get because every deal is a new deal. And every time you get it is a new way of getting it. And so, what we wanted to do at Trivest was we wanted to turn that, all of the things that make a private equity firm, turn that into a flywheel that it spins on its own with not a lot of energy and creates a lot of deal flow. So, in the case of business development, the way that works is institutionalizing a process, getting enough people so that if one person isn't quite doing enough, there's enough people that are making that go so fast that all of a sudden we're getting so many deals that we don't know what to do with them.
Right. And Jim Collins says it's like you got to focus on this one thing. And if you do that at a 9 to 10 level, then you can't help but then do this. And if you do that at 9 or 10, you can't help but do this. And this is kind of how you provide the value. And then it leads to then this, which is the operational and the processes. And then when it comes back here, it starts to spin
And that's
faster and
exactly right. I
faster.
mean, it's what we did with each of us stages of our business, from business development to the value proposition to the value creation. And each of those now kind of has its own flywheel.
Right.
And the nice thing is, I used to be involved in every aspect. I'm now chairman emeritus, so I'm not really involved with much of anything, but all those things are happening every day. And it's not because of a partner pushing it. It's
Right.
because it's happening part of the culture of
Right.
our business, and that's what's allowing, with
And
guardrails, with a
right.
culture, with people knowing what fits.
And then at the middle of the flywheel in the circle was like that thing that you talked about. Why do you exist? And if you didn't, who cares? But that kind of vision, that purpose. And the way that you make money, obviously, is you're buying and you're investing your money. And then if in 5 years you can 3x the value, then you're making money for yourselves, the owner, especially if he's letting the money ride, and then for the people that are giving you the capital. I know when Buffett started, he had a typical kind of 2% management fee, 20% of the profits. What was your, or what's the typical fund structure? What was the size also? Like when you guys are doing a new fund, how much you typically raise it?
Well, for a long time, we were just a single fund,
Hmm.
and one of the things that we made as our most important feature was not to be chase AUM, assets
Right.
under management.
Okay.
And it was much more important to continue to prove that we were an alpha in terms of results, and that we had a low beta and a high alpha. Investors are our customers, is the way I look at it. And so you talk to our investors and say, what do you want? Everybody said the same thing. Well, I want to invest in 3X funds.
Right.
And I was very naive when I asked them that question. And I assumed, well, that's what our competition must be doing. And so, well, let's build a business model that gets a 3X return. Now, at the time that we took over, about 27% of our deals were earning 3X or better. That's not bad, but that's not an average of 3X. So you had to build a business model where now over 75% of our companies are averaging 6X. Kind of the first part of that magic to get things to go in the right direction was building a business model that was going to get us the right return. The other thing, like as I said, I wanted to build a model where we just raised our hands. So we didn't want to be in a position where, even though we could raise go from a $300 million fund to 500. I initially said our next fund's only going to be 325 because we need to continue to prove this fund is going
Right.
to be that 3X fund. Well, that fund ended up being a 4X fund. The next
Wow.
fund that we raised was 550. We could have raised $1 billion, but we just took 550. That also is a 4X fund. Through that, we were able to reinvest into our business. That's where we started growing business development.
Right.
That brought in more deal flow. That deal flow brought in different type of deal flow, where you mentioned at the very beginning of of our conversation that you can invest in minority positions. That's when we started our minority fund.
Got it.
That allowed us to raise even more money, continue to reinvest into our firm, grow it in terms of people. Then we raised a fund that just did smaller deals that would be very fragmented industries that we could grow into bigger companies. And then ultimately, larger deals because we were growing companies from 2 to 5 million of EBITDA to 30, 40, 50, 100 million. So we
Wow.
started just buying these larger companies. So we've grown in the last several years from about a $300 million, or when
Right.
me and my partners took over, 300 million. We're now about 3.5 billion of active funds under management, 4 different
Wow.
funds, one strategy, all founder family, but 4 extensions, and about over $6 billion of assets under
And what were
management.
when Buffett's time and a lot of private equity or hedge funds are like the standard 2% management fee on AUM and 20% of the profits. Was that the model that you guys followed?
That's still the model. If we achieve great results, we can get a
Bigger.
premium share on the profit share, but we're a 2 and 20 shop. I don't feel like we need to do any more than that.
Yeah, to me, this is just fascinating, and I could just talk to you forever on it. It's not my business, but I'm just fascinated, like you, on how business works. So here you're doing something that you really love. You always wanted, basically, since junior achievement, to do this, but you found a platform that you could substantially improve, be creative, and you're investing in like 78 companies in a
Yeah.
year. So now you're really back to that, the robber barons kind of thing. It's like you're looking for those Standard Oil kind of companies that you're hoping to, you know, really build. And then if you have $1 billion and you're taking a 2% management fee and you're growing them four, five, 6x, and you're taking 20% of that, then you could see obviously how you could build wealth very quickly. But moving away from kind of the financial capital, from a constant growing your intellect and growth mindset, how important was that for you? Because you mentioned a lot of books. And were you one of these people that were just constantly learning? And how important is that?
I'm not. I'm a huge book reader. I'm not a
Mm,
huge business book reader.
okay.
Most business books, I think, can be a paragraph, or at most one chapter. Very rare do they need to be 200 pages, that most of them are. Um,
So what kind
uh,
of books were you reading? Was it
so
biographies?
I love biographies. I love everything from biographies to John Grisham novels. So
Love those too.
anything and everything in between. Right now, I'm reading The Bully Pulpit by, I think, Doris Kearns, which is on Teddy Roosevelt and
Yeah,
Howard Taft and their relationship, and fascinating
he's
kind of
great.
time in history. Yeah,
I had a chance to interview her, and wow, what a fascinating. She was a White House fellow, and I wrote a book on leadership lessons of the White House fellow. She had worked for Lyndon Johnson when she was like 26 years old in the White House, then wrote a book about Lyndon Johnson, and that's kind of what started her career. But I love those books where you can learn and be entertained at the same time.
right.
So, and what is the book that you mentioned a bunch of books, but have most gifted others or recommended?
It actually would be becoming a category of one by far and away. Uh,
Well, thank you, and I already ordered it while we were talking on Kindle, so
You'll enjoy it. It could be, it's not a paragraph book, but it's a one chapter book, but you'll read the whole thing.
oh,
It's
it's
very entertaining. Like every business book, there's a lot of anecdotes and stories, but I dog-eared a lot of pages in that book and refer to it often. In fact, I do a seminar on becoming a category of one for companies,
wow.
and I'll be doing one next week. I haven't done one in quite a while,
Do
but
you do it on Zoom or in person?
doing this one on Zoom. So
Send me a link. I'd love to I'm available. I'd love to watch it.
yeah,
I know
it's
I'd
I haven't done one in many years, because it's turned over to our ops guys, so I'm going very old school. I need to probably update it, but,
it's good.
see how it goes. We'll see how it goes, and then we'll go from there,
I
Charlie, but
like old school. So on the social side, you've created great wealth. You're an R360, and now it's about legacy. And we have a mutual friend, Craig Kielberger, who has been not once, twice, but like four times on Oprah, who got $10 million from Oprah at the age of 15 to help her with what she wanted to do in Africa. And I know you and your family are going to be meeting with him in Toronto where he lives. But what do you want to do? And I didn't even mention that you went from being in junior achievement in Miami to actually running one of the most successful junior achievement chapters in the United States. So you have been running that for a long time. You're in all kinds of schools teaching kids entrepreneurship, financial literacy. But you've done that for a long time. Tell me about what
Yep.
you want to do with Craig and about, you, Sissy, the family.
Sure. Yeah, it's not so much about wealth creation that was bigger than I would have ever imagined in life. And I'm a builder. Trivest is pretty much built. It's up to the next team to take it to the next level. They help big way to take it to this level. So 100% confident they're going to continue to grow and prosper. But for me, it's as you said, legacy and impact. Part of that is family. I'm a little bit like my dad that spent a lot of time building and not as much time when my kids were young. So I'm
Right.
hoping that now they're in their 30s, and we've got 5 grandkids, and it's certainly trying to spend more time with them, but also creating a family legacy. And so we're doing family meetings and all that. Part of that, we came up with our family mission statement, which I cannot tell you what it is, but I can tell you what our family motto is. And that's what really is defining this last chapters of my life. Because everybody's got a mission statement. Nobody can recite it because it's all those big words that,
Right.
the adjectives fly high and blah, blah, blah. But our family motto is, you know what it is. You're smiling there. So, and that's good. You remember it. It's ho, ho, ho.
Yep.
And I think family mission statements can be summed up so simply. And for us, ho, 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 each word has meaning. The first word means help ourselves. And although some people may say that sounds self centered, it's just the opposite. Until you help yourself, you can't help others. And
Right.
so we have a responsibility to educate, to take care of ourselves physically, mentally, and do everything that we can be to be self sufficient and independent. I believe you get a lot of self worth out of that. And so, a lot of our giving, and I think junior achievement is about that. We're not giving them fish, we're teaching them to fish. And so, our giving and our legacy, if you want to say a primary area that we want to focus on from a social perspective, is helping people help themselves through education, through other ways. And so, more than just junior achievement, we're involved in a number of things
Right.
that are helping people. And the newest program with Craig, which I'll talk about in a second, is all about that.
And you've also had a passion for like taking plastics out of the ocean. Where did that come from?
That'll be the third part of
Oh, okay.
the ho, ho, ho. The second word means help others, help our family, help others. If everybody could take on themselves, we wouldn't need any charities. We'll never be
Right.
at that point, certainly not in our lifetime. So there is going to be people that need help from just basic sustenance, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, that are going to need the most basic needs. And so we give areas. We're helping with charity water to provide fresh water throughout the world. It's a solvable problem. More people got behind it. Uh, we could provide safe, clean drinking water, which helps. There's so many different avenues with just that one thing. People need to be fed, so we do a lot of things just to help others so that they can continue to get to a point where they can help themselves. And then the third word is help our planet. And I'm a boater. We are very fortunate to spend a good part of our annual time on a ship called the World that travels around the world.
So cool.
And
It's
that is so
so cool.
cool. It's we're so blessed to be able to do that.
So you're literally spending, like, just to be clear, like 4 or 5 months on a boat with, I don't know, maybe 100 other families that are going around the world, and you guys vote every year where you want to go. And you said at the beginning that you just love to travel. As a teenager, you went all over the country, and this gives you the ability to go on this adventure every year all around the world.
Every day. I mean, I feel like I never waste a day of my life when I'm on the world. Every day's a new day. It's not like a typical cruise ship where you're getting at 9, you're leaving at 5. Here, you're spending usually 2 full days. So you can get out, you can meet the people, you can have dinners, you can have impact, you can see the culture.
Wow.
You can use it as a launching point and go deeper into a country and then come back as it's in another port. Everybody on the ship, it's like picking up our 360 members, and
Sure.
everyone just would be fit right in.
you let Mark Moses stay in your place for a couple of weeks, and he liked it so much, he decided to
Yeah,
join you.
no, we have another member that's getting on of our 360. They'll be on with us
Really?
next month. Yeah, we're looking forward to hosting them and showing them around. And so yeah, that's been phenomenal. But going back to the kind of the social aspect, it's that ho ho ho. Continuing to find ways to help people help themselves, helping others, and helping our planet.
Right,
So I'm on the board of Ocean Conservancy. That's the plastic side.
right.
uh, you know, when you travel on the world, for the most
So
part, you look at the oceans, say that they're
right,
pretty clean, but they're really not. And especially when you get into Indonesia and these other areas that are less developed, the amount of trash that goes into, I mean, it's this pile of stuff that you're
right.
literally cruising through, and almost all of it's plastic. It would be better if it was all glass because it would sink to the bottom. It's inert, really doesn't have any impact. But plastics break down in size to everybody's heard the term microplastics and small
Sure.
plastics. They get ingested, they get into the food system, they kill fish. Ghost gear, huge problem. All this fishing gear, people have these nets and they become tangled. The fishermen just cut it and they just float in the water. They entangle fish, they kill all kinds of things. So forget about the whole global warming issue. There's just a huge, huge issue with something that nobody can say is not
Pollution.
man-made.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just pollution. All of these are solvable issues.
Right.
It just needs the proper attention. I don't think anybody, if they saw somebody dump a bunch of plastic in the ocean, would say, "Oh, good for you. That's a good, smart thing to do."
Yeah. And tell me about this thing that you're thinking about now. What's that project about?
Well, I bet you, Charlie, you had a dream and you had a goal, I bet, early in your life. I don't know what it was, but you had one, right?
Yeah,
And I had one. And when I ask kids nowadays, what's your dream? I get a lot of blank stares. The dreams you do get are the ones that probably aren't going to be realistic, where I want to be a movie star, a football player, basketball star, whatever. It's probably not the dream. It's great that they have one, but that probably isn't something that they may be able to actually attain very easily. At least they have a dream.
yeah,
Yet still, I think if you go to other countries, people still believe in the American dream. They want to come to America. Forget
yeah,
about all the noise. We're still a country of immigrants. We're still going to have a lot of immigration. We're still going to, thank God, we're going to have growth because it's not going to come from natural born citizens. It'll
yeah.
come from some form of immigration. But forget about that. People are here. We have our U.S. citizens, and the American dream, I think, is alive and well, but it's dying in our youth.
Mm,
What we want to do, we call it my dream, my path, and to get kids to inspire to have dreams again, and provide the path for them to attain that dream or beyond that, get on that dream. And so, simply put, if you look at 80% of our poverty as a result of 20% of our zip codes, we know where the issues are.
right.
Those same kids are spending on average 7 hours on their phone, TikTok,
Yeah.
Instagram, whatever.
What? You know my kids?
So,
Oh,
7 hours.
yeah,
I'm bad. I'm like 3, 3.5. I think that's awful. But 7. Can we take a piece of that time and can we turn that time on Instagram to give them a dream and a path? And so the idea is to build short vignettes initially from people that look like them, that
mhm,
live in their towns, that were them at their age at some point, and they became a nurse, they became a plumber, they became a criminologist, they became a video editor, they
mhm,
became a nurse, they became
right,
whatever. But to inspire through short vignettes and stories from people that they can identify with. And then, I don't know, we're in the early stages of all
right,
this, to build it up so that not only can they get inspiration and maybe get a dream, but also then a path to actually achieve it. And so We're working on this. I don't know. We're in the sausage making. Will it take off? Will it not? I don't know. But it's back to where you were saying. We want to inspire that spark, and we think that we can build something that can reignite the American dream and provide an opportunity for students, kind of more in that middle school and senior high school, to have a dream. Because if you don't have a dream, if you don't have a goal, you're that meandering river, right? You'll just end up where you end up, and that may be fine for some. But if we can get more people to have some type of goal, some type of dream, I believe we'll be a better country for it. I believe that the individuals will be better for it, and they'll be working on that first word of ho ho ho, of helping ourselves so that they can become self-sufficient and building self-esteem.
One of the most powerful books I've read. It's called Inside the Magic Shop by James Dottie. His father was in prison. His mother was clinically depressed. He was an F student. And in 1968, I 14 years old, and he's riding on his bike, and he's a magic shop and in a new like strip mall. So he goes, and the owner wasn't there. There was an older lady, looked a little like a hippie, and it was actually the mother of the guy running it, and taught
Hmm.
him how to meditate and how to dream and how to basically program your subconscious mind by first relaxing and then saying that whatever you wanted to manifest as dream, it was for a good purpose, very loving, to help others. And then you project into the future and spend about 10 minutes really thinking with your five senses. Okay, I'm there. I've created this. What does it smell like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And by doing it, he started doing this, and and the next thing you know, he goes from being an F student to actually graduating. He didn't get into any college because of his grades, but he showed up and he begged and he got in. And then next thing you know, the guy then gets into medical school. And then the next thing you know, he is a brain surgeon at Stanford University. And then next thing you know, he's dreaming of bring like peace and altruism to the world. The next thing you know, he starts the Dalai Lama Center at Stanford. And it's an amazing book. And you see what people, oh, you got to have a dream. But this stuff actually works. You,
Right.
it really does. And, even R360 came through during the middle of the pandemic. I had this dream of, if we could get individuals like you and others that have created great wealth, but generosity of spirit is in their bones, and they want to go down, really making an impact in the world, and take their entrepreneurial grit that you talked about and transform not a business, but the world and the country they live in. And that all happened like in the middle of the pandemic. I was like, "You're retired. Like, what do you crazy? You're nuts." And now we're sitting with 140 members and growing. And it's exactly what you said. You have to be willing to dream and think of the possibility. But there's one book. So it was one of the maybe three books in my life I've picked up like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. I start reading it. And I don't stop until I'm done till like 3 in the
Wow.
morning. And I didn't know this guy, and I have never done this before. I actually wrote a handwritten letter, I put it in an envelope, sent it to the publisher, thinking, chances of getting to them. And then I really kept thinking about, I'd love to meet this guy. And 3 months later, I met somebody in San Francisco, said, you know what? You got to meet my friend Jim Dottie at Stanford. I said, you know, Jim? And he introduces me, and then we do an R360 trip to Necker Island with Richard Branson. And who did I invite? I invited Jet, and he spent 4 days with us, and just incredible human. And then he wrote a new book, and he talks as a brain surgeon of what really is happening in the brain that makes this actually happen? Like, what's the science behind it? So you're absolutely right about that. I'm glad you're doing that. And if you can activate more people by your work, it'll be transformative. I want to talk one more thing. Can't let you go because this has really changed my life and set, most people think about leaving their wealth. You divide it up amongst your kids, your grandkids, and by the third generation, it's pretty much gone. And I heard you at an R360 meeting say that you had learned something from Byron Smith way back in the 1800s. He started Northern Trust and then American Toolworks, and he did something totally different. And tell me what you and Sissy have decided to do, which I am also following your footsteps. And you showed me what you did. You introduced me to the lawyer in Chicago that put this together for you, and I thought it was just brilliant what you and Sissy are doing.
Well, thank you. It's interesting. Well, one, nothing's more important at the end of the day than your children, and you hope you put them on the right path. Everybody's got their own journey, and I love my children to death. I've been blessed. It's always
Yeah,
challenges and stories and opportunities, and you still feel like we're growing our relationship. And it's all three of them are
right.
just great. They're two spouses, are wonderful, and five grandkids. Couldn't be happier, more pleased with the way that they've ended up in life and the journeys they're on, and looking forward to continuing that.
And guys like you and I build these blessings. You also have a responsibility, since you have five grandchildren, to the great, great, great grandchildren you're
That's
never
right.
going to meet.
And so so I started this journey of what do you do? Well, originally, my
Right,
wills were set up where it was simply when we die, they each get a third, and then it's divvied out over kind of 5-year increments as
right,
they get
right.
older.
Same thing.
That was kind of what it was, and I go,
Right.
well, that doesn't work with the way life has turned out for us. And so then you start talking. I started talking to a lot of people that were in similar situation to
Hmm.
me and Sissy, and saying, "Well, what are you doing?" And you're talking to all the G1s, and what you got very quickly was a common theme of what they didn't want their kids to be. They didn't want them to be entitled.
Yeah.
They didn't want them to be this, they didn't want them to be that, and so all of the estate planning was around what they didn't want their children to be. Never felt right, could never articulate what was wrong with that, but it didn't feel right. The lawyers were all saying, "Your kids will never get along after you pass. Split up the money, divide it, let them do with it,
Right.
on an individual basis." That never felt right. We're a family. So then I wasn't really happy with what I was learning. And as you mentioned, one of our investors, a very successful family, and met with them and went to their family reunion. And it was the Smith family. And they had a very different tact. You mentioned the founder. He actually had four sons
Right.
and did divide it up between the four sons. Three of those branches kind of died off and not much happened. This fourth branch, over 100 years ago, was set up where the money wasn't divided up, and it's now that family reunion was 150 people.
Wow.
Every single person you met, whether they were a school teacher, an artist, a middle manager, a CEO, a private equity
Right.
managing partner, any one of them, you would say, "Wow, that's a legacy. I'd be happy to have any one of these people in as part of my family." And this is over 100 years later. So I said, "Well, wait, we've been going at this the wrong way, Sissy. We should be talking to families who have successfully
Yeah.
gotten through generations rather than talking to attorneys and G1s. Let's talk to
Right.
G4s, G5s." And what we found out was two important rules that I took to heart. One is never, ever, 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 ever split up the money. As soon as you start dividing, it's not multiplying.
Yeah. Not compounding. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Two, never, ever, 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 ever give them the principal. And so those two are the cornerstones of the trust that we've set up, so that it's not my money, it's not Sissy's money, it's a family asset that is the family's, and the family's to manage, and that while we're alive, they're starting now to manage a piece of those assets and benefiting from it. But they never get the principal, and if the principal grows, they benefit more because they get a piece of the proceeds every year. If it goes down, they get less, and they're a steward of this family asset to grow for their children and grandchildren. And so, the three children that we had, everybody loved one another, but they were growing apart. One lives in, California, the other two were in Florida, all doing different things, all establishing families and building lives and growing apart, other than
Right.
when we would come together for a family. Now the three of them are all working together. They're building, learning. The other thing I found talking to G1s is that they really didn't weren't preparing their children for the ultimately this transfer of wealth. Uh, no matter how much they were giving, it was going to be a large transfer.
Right.
And so it's nice to be alive and help with that planning, see that developing, both with the good and the bad. It's not
Right.
easy. Uh, uh, in some ways, I feel like I had it easier. I had no options. The only option I had was I needed to take care of my family. I needed to make sure that my family was provided for. So I had one and only thing in my mind, which was that. Uh, our kids have the opportunity, not that many people get out little violins for them, but you know, it's still, oh, I have any choice,
Right.
right? Because I don't have to worry about the financial side as much. So, but that in itself can be, overwhelming.
I just want people to understand how this actually works. And so if you have, let's say, $100 million, and if you were to divide it up, it goes, but you have a particular skill set of growing and compounding money.
Right,
So if something's growing at 10% a year, it's basically doubling every 7 years. But if it's growing at 20, it's every 3.5 years.
right.
So the 100 million goes to 200 to 400 to 800 to billion six. The principal keeps growing. And then the idea is, hey, let's take 5% a year and distribute in some sort of formula, but keep the principal growing.
Always right, right.
And then you determine how that happens and when you as a family member start getting a distribution. And I think the Smiths, you said, now it's what 150 people
Right.
that it's
It's, yeah, benefiting 150 people, and, I think it's public record that you can find out, so, billions of dollars.
right.
Originally, it was a $20 million, I think, bequest way back when, 100 plus years ago, and now that's billions of dollars of value. So exactly that point, and it's now supporting 150 people instead of one family way back
Yeah.
when.
And I'm one of, I'm wearing like the Bitcoin. I'm a big Bitcoin believer. I run a Bitcoin node. And if in 2020 back then, if you would have bought, put 100,000 into Bitcoin and when it was 1,000, you'd have 100 Bitcoin, which now has
Did you
grown
see
from,
did you just see the
uh,
story of the guy who's
yeah,
bought
yeah, the
2
pizza guy.
Papa John pizza for
Oh yeah.
10,000 Bitcoins, and now it's worth over $1 billion?
Yeah. Yeah. If you invested just 100,000 and 100 Bitcoin when it was 1,000, well, now it's over 100. So now it's over 10 million. And if you believe Michael Saylor, which I do, because it's all just math, in 20 years, it's going to be 13 million.
Right,
And then now that 100,000 grows to 1.3 billion. But if you give it away, people say, I need the money. I'm going to sell it. It's not going to be compounding. You
right,
need and at 29% compounded a year, which is what the low ball projection is for Bitcoin as it gets adopted, that could support and obviously continue to grow. And you're having, that same idea. So in your case, you want to make sure that it's the blessings that you and Missy have created together are going to really,
Continue on for generation and that's the whole goal. Now,
right?
the key there is they gotta have babies.
Yes, and you can incentivize those things, I found out through talking
That's
to
right.
your lawyer. I said, "Really?" It's like, "Oh, yes, we can incent that." So,
Well, I think just, our kids knowing they have financial security has allowed them to say, "Well, it's okay to bring a baby into the world."
right, it's a big
Yes.
responsibility, and, we have, a new potential member. He's dealing with this autism crisis, and, he was Entrepreneur of the Year last year, and, there's just a lot of challenges and risks these days bringing,
There are.
babies into the world, and but and having that security. I'm actually I just started writing for Market Watch. They just gave me a column after 10 pieces. And my piece next week, I'll send it to you. I think it's coming out on Monday. It's called The Vanderbilt Curse, where you wanted to go to school. Well, Vanderbilt was one of the guys that built a massive, basically in those days, the equivalent of 100 billion. And by 1970, it was all gone. And he
Right.
didn't train the next generation. It was just split up. There wasn't a lot of thought. And because of your idea, I'm writing this article about the Vanderbilt course and really the importance of thinking this through the right way. And of course, you need to have your spouse on board as well. And I'm still in that journey
Still
working on
working
that.
through that. Yeah, no, that's a key. Good luck.
There needs to be alignment. One of the last things I wanted to touch is spirituality. Like, how has that played a role, your purpose for you, your family? How important has that been in your life?
I'm a Christian. I believe there's, something after this life. I also believe I love the Eastern religions that have more of a onus on the individual
Yeah.
to kind of achieve something during their life, and so mine's kind of a mix, maybe of the best of both, and I think the overall elements of Christianity, of Buddhism, of these other religions, the parts that I take away are that there is, a purpose to your life and that there is an opportunity for us to impact others in our lives in a positive way. And so, that's where I've been kind of leading. I mean, we don't go to church every Sunday. We used
Right.
to. I used to teach Sunday school, and kind of the problematic part
Right.
of that is not a big part of our lives anymore. But I think the essence of what, the religions are about are a bigger part of our life. So, it's still a, very important, aspect of what we're after. We haven't delved into it as, deeply in some respects, but I think from a, overall perspective, it's something that's very important to us.
Oh, it's very admirable. And you bring up, I'm always taken by in the Gospel of Matthew 25:6. It's the only time that Jesus gets really upset where he's going to send somebody into the depths of hell where their teeth will be gnashing. And it's the parable of the master who leaves and he's going to go away for a while. So he gives his most uh, trusted servant 5 talents, which back then was a big amount of silver. The next one, two, and the next one, one. And then he comes back in a few years, and the one with five doubled it, invested it. The one with two doubled it, invested it. And the third was scared and hid it beneath the ground, buried it, and took it back and gave him one. But the deeper meaning of what it so he took the one and he gave it to the guy with the five, is that we all have gifts. Like, you were born, obviously, with certain God given gifts that you have used very well since the day that first book really motivated you through a very long career with a lot of twists and turns where it seems that you made steps back to develop yourself. And today, you're probably in the final spot where you're going to make the greatest impact in the world by this ho, ho, ho thing with your family. Plus, the ho, ho, ho 10 generations from now, when the wealth has grown even larger and you have happy, purposeful children, grandchildren, great grandchildren taking the blessings that you've created and using them to be a force for good in the world. I think you're just a great example of having been super focused, and you had these gifts of seeing like processes and how to improve things and being creative, and just it seems like willing to just totally turn the table. And you didn't talk about it, but I know from sourcing deals, but if you bring us a deal and we do it, we'll give you a Mercedes. It's super
Right.
creative. It's not a huge expense, but hey, if it can motivate you and help you bring in 4,000 great deals to look at, I think that's
That's
a wonderful
well,
thing.
well, thank you. From your mouth to God's ears. So
Yeah.
hopefully, all that rings true, and it's uh, always looking forward. For me, I'm a cup half full guy. I think
Hmm.
that it's important to be positive, and not dwell on the past, not dwell on mistakes, move forward, and always look forward to something, because there's something to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, my last question is just, is there any question I should have asked that I didn't, or a final message that you wanted to leave out there that we haven't talked about?
Just ho ho ho. I think
Ho,
that
ho, ho.
everybody should live that.
Help ourselves, help others, and help our planet. You can never forget ho, ho, ho.
No,
So,
that's right. So that's how we start and end all of our family meetings, and love to spread the ho 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 in a little different way than Santa intended it. Although I think that Santa probably did intend it that way. He just didn't spell it out for everybody. So that can be our job.
well, I really appreciate our time together, learned a lot more about you, and I think this will be a really inspirational podcast for those that are watching. So,
The three birds just flew across your window. So I don't know. That seems like a very great
wow.
ending. It's
Wa-
it was really beautiful. I hadn't seen that before. All of a
Wow.
sudden, it was like, three seagulls or four seagulls. That's perfect timing.